Well, we'll wait till quantum really comes around in the mainstream before we expect it to go.
Mind, there's a lot of centralization going on.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever the world you might be today. Welcome. This is Chris Hewer, and I am here reporting for the Web 3.1 Unconference and Leadership Summit. And I am so grateful today to be joined by Agustin Cortes, who has this wonderful company, has this great idea, Learn, is it .io? I believe it's .io. Yes.
.io.
Learn.io. I'm a big IO fan. .co, IO, now XYZ, whatever it is. I'm a big fan. Just getting more people access to us easily. And actually, I met Agustin through another friend of ours, Justin. And Justin Allingham had this wonderful work that he's been doing around education reform, about what to do next. And he really wanted me to Agustin because he has this company, Learn.io, that's LIRN, by the way, also a little difference on the IO. But Agustin, why don't you just go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and the company so that I don't butcher it somehow.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. It's a great pleasure to be here. And yeah, to give the higher overview, my name is Agustin. I've been building Learn and been in the edtech space for over 2.5 years. It's a big passion of mine, and it's a mission-centric build out for me. What we're trying to do with Learnio is build an internet learner protocol where whatever you learn on the internet will be validated and you will have proof of competency, and really disrupt the education system where things have been slower process to move on to the web, and with people being self-taught, self-guided learning, it's now time to build a system for that.
What I really wanted to get into today is a little bit more of his journey to get here. Now, Agustin, I guess we'll start at the very beginning of how you started getting into Web3. But as I understand it, you, like myself and millions of other people around the world, discovered all of this free knowledge out on the web, and were able to tap into it by going after it and learning it and doing it yourself. So I just want you to share a little bit about your own journey and how you really, as a self-directed, self-managed individual, pursued this development course and then learned how to build this technology with the team that you've put together.
Yeah, this is the story time. So I think through good fortune, some eudaimonia going on. I've always been a metacognitive kid, always been thinking about thinking. So when I entered the chapters of post-high school, getting to that point in my life, I had the decision to pursue traditional route of going to university or possibly build my own venture. So I chose the latter, and I started building companies from my house, my parents' house. And first venture was doing paid ads for local businesses. Then I went into e-commerce. And this whole time, while building these companies and developing myself, I would just use free resources on the web. Didn't come from a background of money. So I just go to YouTube, go through the ads and consume the information. And from there, it really led to the process of being self-taught on the web. And the older I got and the more I started to understand semantics and ontology of information itself, I started to realize that the internet is the biggest database of information. It's the collective representation of human knowledge, yet the process and protocols within the system to validate education are outdated. And where I started to experience a lot of pain points was when I was transitioning to land a career in tech, trying to land a stable career on the tech side. And when I was applying for roles, one of the biggest friction points that I had was I didn't have a degree, or I didn't have true form of validation to represent that I was knowledgeable in a certain field. And this is a huge pain point because I did have the competency and the skill set to be in that role. However, the current social consensus mechanism to validate my knowledge was short, because what I learned on the internet, there was no way to represent that. So that was a huge pain point, and it led to this idea of, okay, we can really create a system to allow educators and learners to self-teach and also validate. So our first idea was actually quite simple. How I mentioned that I would use YouTube a lot because it was free. I wanted to build a YouTube for educational videos only, and I told a couple best friends about it, and they were like, "Oh, that's a great idea. I'm totally on board. Let me know if I can help build out." So I got two of my best friends to help out on that mission. One was a designer, Luis Fausto, and then my other best friend, Carlos Miranda, helped more on the technical standpoint. So we built this YouTube for educational videos only. And what was very exciting from the get-go was that we would ask people through Facebook ads from around the world. We would ask them about their online learning experience. How do they learn? What's the process? How do they view the current education system? And all of them, or I should say a good majority of them, were validating our theory that you can learn online, you can get this skill set, and then you can apply it to the real life. However, to verify it was falling short. So this startup just started scaling momentum. We got to tens of thousands of users. Things were looking good. And at the same time, raising capital from VCs is a whole different story. We weren't able to raise, and we were like, where do we want to position ourselves for the near future? But where we had this North Star goal was to build this internet learner's identity, use data, use verification that someone can be knowledgeable through the information they learn on the internet, and represent that. Kind of like what LinkedIn did for careers, where you would showcase your experience. We wanted something similar for education. And with Web 2 and the current process to that, it was fairly limited. It was definitely going to be centric through one platform. But when we found out about Web 3 and the capabilities of blockchains and wallets, and being able to attach identity to a wallet in itself, this led to an exciting light bulb moment where a very approach to decentralized education came around. And this has been our current build out, where we've been focusing on how do we create a protocol to do proof of education in itself. And this leads to the philosophical question, like, what does it mean to be educated? How do you translate that to acts of the truth? So this has been an exciting build out. But what's great about it is that a lot of people wholeheartedly believe that the future, or a future of education on the internet, is going to be tied to verification of competency now. And systems, institutions have been, at the forefront. They have their strong processes to get the cycle going, but this could be an alternative route for the self-taught learners.
Let me come back to just a couple of quick points. You said now that I've gotten older. You are 26 now, 28? How old are you?
I turned 24 tomorrow.
There you go. Okay. I thought that was that way. And I just wanted to, because earlier you said, as I got older, I realized. So I figured that. And that's one of the greatest things, is that now that we have access to the world's greatest library in the form of the internet, and all these other people sharing their wisdom and insights, it's all accessible for you. So, and that's the problem that it arises as well, because we don't need that piece of paper necessarily in order to be able to perform a function or skill, or be a part of a team and contribute value. And I think you've rightly hit upon the essence of it, which is more than the proof of education, or maybe that's the broader one, but it's that competency in a given area, that you can do SEO, or that you can do smart contracts, or whatever it might be. So I love that you're doing that design pattern. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to share your story with so many people, because I believe it's a fundamental design pattern solution to a real huge problem. And I'm sure you're going to have lots of competitors, but let's talk about what you're doing now, because you're doing something a little differently with Learn. So how are you approaching the Learn.io design protocols for assessing and confirming competency?
Yeah, so these are the big macro questions that we ponder about. So I really went into the realm of epistemology, competency, and tried to sit down with as many people that are passionate in this space. And what I found out there to be is essentially like three core pillars to this realm of education. So the first pillar is knowledge, where it's more theory centric, where you can understand concepts, articulate them. You can use verbal processes to verify you know something. So like assessment tests and more conceptual based proof of knowledge. This leads to the second pillar, where you can know something, but to do something and implement is a different process. So this is more an empiricism, where it's action orientated, where you do something and the output is tangibly out there. And that is totally different from the theory, where it's just the dimension of thought. And verifying these two things is a whole different process. With theory, you can verify through assessment or do simpler processes where it's with empiricism. It's more project output based, where there has to be a grader or verifier for approval. So this is to the question, I mean, like decentralization, like who is going to be the educator, who is going to agree on approving the project and the outputs and so on. So we're definitely looking to be more of like a decentralized aspect, but then also creating consensus mechanisms that the people that are involved in the ecosystem got credible capabilities. And this does lead to the third point, which is legitimacy. And legitimacy is correlated more toward like a social landscape where people that believe in the information of displayment, whatever it may be, it gives the displayment merit. So a perfect example for this would be like Ivy League's degrees. The pedigree and the social signal of receiving a degree gives a lot of legitimacy to the holder. And if you look under the hood, what's really going on, there's processes and systems that people are aware of. They say, okay, that's what happens, and they agree upon it, and they collectively, create this legitimacy of issuance for knowledge and skill. So we want to create these variables of proof of knowledge, is the theory side, proof of skill, which is empiricism, and then legitimacy, where people start believing into this protocol. And at the end of the day, the dream would be that if someone, say you, Chris, you are very knowledgeable in your area and you become an issuer to verify people's skill sets in a certain domain. People first become aware of you, your background. People see that you've started to educate a lot of people. The dream would be like, oh, you got an NTT, which is non-transferable token, from Chris, and that is a lot of social currency. It's legit. So you came around from essentially the ground up, but you were able to gain the trust, the whole process of so on, and your issuance of knowledge is carried with social credibility across the space.
Well, and so in that way, if you get a Harvard degree and it's legit and they can check it and call the admissions office and say you graduated and all that and validate it, then, that's the legitimacy that you're talking about there. And what you're looking at here, as I believe, is the ability to give organizations like Lambda School or Art Institute or, myself or Web 3.1, if we were to do that, the ability to essentially certify individuals' competencies through this combination of the proof of knowledge and the proof of skill, right? And so that's a really interesting thing, and I'm really interested in that. And I see that being so important, not just here in the US with our first world problems, but around the world, as we see doctors now having to move countries or become refugees. Certainly with what happened in the Mideast the last several years, what's happening down on the South American border or on the southern border of the US to Latin America and beyond. People are moving all the time. And unfortunately, just like they don't have bank accounts, they don't have proof that they're doctors or that they're these other things. But the great thing that the blockchain and digital wallets provide is for them to be able to present some form of that they can present on demand, that can be verified. And then instantly, I know that you're competent in this area and I can put you to work. So this really changes the dynamics of the world, particularly of disadvantaged populations. But obviously, it also supports first world people, professionals, and entrepreneurs and others like yourself. So that's really fascinating. And I'm really excited about what that means for us.
You definitely nailed it with the blockchain being the source of truth, in the sense that since it's immutable, the whole product of the blockchain is what allows for these new systems to arise, where it can allow for social construct of concepts to be validated, exactly like I said, issuing credentials, where it was once through like a bureaucratic process. All you really need now is the blockchain in your wallet. And if you have that, doesn't matter where you go, because the blockchain is the source rather than a central institution. This is what's exciting about the spaces. We're in education, there's DeFi, there's so many areas that blockchain just gives that source of possibility.
So I really love this vision for the future, and I know you're onto something with this. A lot of stuff still to be determined, But I'm curious, in your mind, coming to our unconference and leadership summit theme, what's it really going to take for that to become the norm? Because I'm still seeing that there's going to be one gap, at least that's real obvious on that, which is that I can go off and learn all this stuff about blockchain and everything on my own on YouTube and reading articles and what have you, but without having that provider to basically institute, these are the standards and norms, and to add the legitimacy on top of the proof of competency and proof of skill. Did I get that right? I'm trying to remember. Yeah. Okay. Because I'm thinking about proof of stake, proof of work, and now proof of space, because I've been talking to Chia a lot about what they're doing. So I'm starting to get a little confused on something. But my point being is still the same. So a self-directed learner like yourself, what you might find, I guess, is others who are validating like these new types of assessment systems. So maybe there's somebody out there who worked on the SCORE model or something along those lines, who is actually built a name for themselves, has written books, has become established, and it might be an individual, might have a small company, but that you're envisioning that those people will actually be operating essentially their own form of the chain. So talk to me a little bit more about what's it going to take. You're going to need thousands of people to become certifiers, right?
Exactly, yes. And that's exactly a huge area too, where it correlates to the social landscape of how do we get it to the norm. I think one of the biggest components would be just proof of concept, where individuals and autodidacts arise and they prove that this alternative route works. And if the future Elon Musk do it through this manner, they say, I didn't go to school, I did it on the web. Here's what I built. These are the step-by-step processes. And more of these individuals come to arise, it will give a spotlight for the proof of concept. Now, this is where I learned a lot about the history of like academia, esoteric processes, to really just the origins of education itself. Like it really derived from the really privileged that had, in the monarchies, that they were the ones to get tutors and be literate. Then it became down to the really wealthy, and then it just started to trickle essentially from top down. But it still reached the point that to get into current educational systems, it's still fairly gatekept in many domains.
Mm-hmm.
But with this processes, it does allow the opportunity to be across the world. Of course, there will be like language barriers, the amount of literature per domain in language and geographical. Like if you're in China, the way you can navigate the web is different from the US.
Yes.
But the point being is that if you got access to the internet information, this protocol or protocols in themselves works, and you can just jump into the system, go through your processes, and it's a more open playing field rather than trying to go through more gate-kept institutions where there's a lot more gate-kept pathways. And if this does work, it will just exponentially create the possibilities of proof of concept, because it's no longer geographically or nationality based, it's across the world that there's builders and learners.
I'm pretty confident this is going to work, and the design pattern is going to work. The question becomes, can you get the team? Can you get the money? Can you get all the rest of this stuff together? So where are you at in terms of moving forward on execution?
Yeah, so this is a big meeting we had last week. We discussed, okay, like this is the North Star, right? We know what we want to do, but we have to take baby steps to build the product out. So as of now, what we're thinking is going to be our MVP to build out is a marketplace for proof of knowledge first. I think tackling the theory side is a little bit more easier, and we would start focusing on getting the demand and the supply side, where there will be issuers, where we can really just start off as simple as it can be, whether it's oneself from the team issuing them out, or we start getting partnerships with more established individuals. But we just do simple assessments for these learners to get proof of education, or proof of knowledge, I should say. And from there, just start building out. And then next step, okay, we got proof of knowledge and the theory side down. Let's jump over to the skill set side. How's that going to look? And yeah, we've been talking to some venture capitalists who are in the education space. It's an exciting time to be building. And if we do secure a round, definitely going to be scaling a lot on the technical side, building smart contracts and deploying on the mainnet is a whole different process. And
Oh,
selecting
yes.
which chain is optimal too. All those questions come around.
Yes, and what I really appreciate is that you're willing to go out and be open about this and try to create this with other people and put your vision out there. It takes a lot of cojones, as they say, and I really respect that. I'll tell you that with my first company, I tried to keep it all private for way too long, and if I had pursued this path, I don't know where I'd be sitting right now. Maybe still sitting here, but I really believe in that. Then a lot of people will feel the opposite on it, but something like this is so big. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to get you up in front of our audience and share your story with more people, because I really like what you're doing. I like the way you come to it. I like that you self-taught like myself and so many other people out there, and understand this from a very personal perspective, and still are looking at the systemic challenges and how do we overcome them and how do we get there. More importantly, you've got an idea of what's our first component. Let's go and get that built. And really what we're hopefully going to be able to do for you or with you is help you find more people who can contribute to what you're doing with Learn.io and what you're doing beyond this. And I know so many of my colleagues are interested in the educational side of this. We're interested in it with Web 3.1. And in fact, we'll talk more about that after we get through the event. And I can actually have some headspace to talk about how we might integrate some of those proof of knowledge concepts into what we're doing around Web 3 and Web 3.1. Augustine, anything else to share before we go ahead and wrap up for today's little discussion?
No, yeah, I think this is a good spotlight. I think this is a future. Education is so broad. There's so many pathways, and there's no right or wrong way to do it. Education itself is non-fungible, but this is a future we see for the people that are self-taught, just really want to focus on developing through the open curriculum and creating a system that has never been around, and building it from the ground up is going to take a long time, over probably a decade or two, but building here for the long run is totally a mission-centric build out here.
Well, I really respect everything you're doing, Augustine, and it's such a pleasure to meet you and welcome you, and looking forward to you sharing more of that vision at the Web 3.1 Leadership Summit. And then we're going to also host a session on the Unconference Day for people who are interested in talking with you more about either asking you questions, contributing to it, and you can share a little bit more of your roadmap, where you're going, and hopefully maybe find some contributors, find some partners, maybe even find some money.
That sounds ideal.
For all of us, yes. And that's what it takes when we do things together. And that's why we're looking at this as the co-ownership economy and the co-creator economy, and the idea that, we are co-elevating. We're co-elevating an iPad off the desk, but we're co-elevating ourselves with you win, I win, and society wins. And that is one of the most important components at the foundation of Web3 for me. And I'm just grateful to have the opportunity to work with you. This has been Chris Hewer speaking with Agustin Cortes, talking about Learn.io and the future of education through Web3. Thank you all very much for joining us.